Hello everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. I hope you're doing well today. Tomorrow is the 1st of January 2024. I hope you're getting ready for some celebration tonight. But before then, as a kind of parting gift for 2023, I'll be talking to you a little bit about the best types for INFJs to date, in my humble opinion. And as you'll see, appearances can deceive as well. I'm not going to be just talking about type. This will be an opportunity to explore different facets, of a good match, for an INFJ and for people of different types as well. So stay tuned if you're interested in getting to know more about what my approach is going to be. And again, remember, this is my perspective as someone who has been around and who's experienced different relationships with people of different types. I do not claim to be wise, but I do claim to have a certain amount of experience in any case. Now, before I move on, don't forget you can get my book on the INFJ, The Ecstatic Soul. Less than $10. Check the reviews on Amazon and see if you haven't got a copy. Get it. It's a very in-depth study of the type. There's also my new novel, The Infinite Castle. Rumor has it the main character is an INFJ. Supports the channel if you get the book, maybe as a Christmas present, a late Christmas present, a Happy New Year present if that exists. You can also get just literally, to support me on Patreon, anywhere from $3 a month. Check the link below. Really helps the channel. Thank you so much to my supporters. Now, let's move on to our topic proper. So I kind of wanted to divide this video into 4 sections, loosely connected. Actually, strongly connected, but I'm not, it's not like I came up with a master plan, but you'll see that those connections are, clear enough. And in this respect, type will only come as the 4th condition, the 4th parameter for finding a person that matches you, okay? The number 1 criterion that I think I want to, I think matters immensely is health. First of all, you want to look for someone who's healthy, and you want to work on your own levels of health. Okay. The second section that I will just be discussing is attachment style. You see that here also there are factors to keep in mind. Interest will come as 3rd, and this is where the question of type will start to be important. And we'll figure that out when we get to talk about interests. And then finally, type, where I will give my opinion on a certain number of types where I think, there's a good chance of there being a match, but not forgetting about the other parameters. Okay, so to start with, of course, you want, before you start thinking of a person's type, you want to sort of make sure that the person is at reasonable levels of health. That is to say that, there's no absolute notion of unhealthy or healthy. No person is like completely healthy. There's no essence of health in a person, just as there is no essence of unhealth. But certainly there are different degrees whereby someone could be unhealthy or someone could be healthy. And by here, we're looking at it through the perspective, the prism of a potential relationship. So we're really thinking in terms of, is this person fit to be in a relationship? Okay. Now, when you're asking yourself that question, you're also obviously asking about what your own situation is. You ought to be able to sincerely and transparently ask yourself, are you ready for a relationship? Are you healthy enough for a relationship? Now, that obviously addresses your psychological disposition. It addresses your maturity. You might be healthy in many respects, but actually not really want a relationship. You might just want to flirt. You might just want to date. You might just want to hang out with your friend, because relationships demand things of you, demands what can be and are objectively sacrifices. You sacrifice certain things for something that you decide is better. That's when you know that you're ready for a relationship, among other things. So is the other person reasonably healthy? This is something that you can only discover in the course of getting to know them, going on dates with them, having conversations. But if you sense either that the person is, not at the levels of health that would facilitate a good relationship, or that you yourself are not at the relation at that level of health, or that neither you nor the other persons are. This might be a good indication that neither of you are ready for a relationship, or for exploring the first steps of a relationship. Of course, a lot of people lie to themselves about being healthy, or about the other person's being healthy, particularly if they're heavily infatuated with the other person. They might want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but sometimes you just have to be tough, to spare yourself a lot of hurt. Unhealthy people can attract each other, but usually it only creates a lot of hurt. Attachment style is another interesting one, because as you may or may not know, a useful framework for determining what your attachment style is if you're secure or insecure, first of all, and if you're not secure, if you're insecure, whether you tend to be avoidant, whether you tend to be anxious, or whether you tend to be anxious avoidant, sometimes also referred to as fearful avoidant or ambivalent. If you explore your attachment style, you might also learn to discover what the attachment style of the other person is. And if you're comfortable during a date, you might be even led to asking them straight away. When I remember this, when I was talking to my wife at the time, we were not together yet, and I had got to a stage where I just plainly said to her, I just want you to know that my attachment style is not secure. My attachment style tends to be anxious, just so that you're aware. So I tend to, among other things, need reassurance, emotional reassurance, maybe more than a secure person would, and there are certain patterns of behavior that indicate anxiousness, and that by being completely transparent about that, you can also help the other person to kind of understand certain types of behavior and not overthink them, because they might be able to refer back to, okay, in a way, like talking about your attachment style is a way of talking about what your needs are going to be, and making sure that the needs are not too different. So we know that, for example, an anxious person is never going to be happy with an avoidant person. That a secure person and a secure person, obviously great, but an anxious person can work with a secure person, as in the case of my relationship with my wife, and so on and so forth. So getting to figure out your attachment style is very, very useful and important, I think. Now, in terms of the interests, of course, you want to have a certain degree of overlap in your interests. It's completely fine not to have all interests in common with your partner, but having an overlap in interest is pretty crucial. Otherwise, there will be a disconnect there. That's where starting to discuss type can be very useful, because among other things, if you have a community, first of all, if the person is interested in type, then you know that you have that interest in common, and that can be good. It can be a real bonding thing, like my wife and I, we met through an interest in MBTI, an interest in identifying as INFJs. It still is a strong connection between us. We have other ones, but that's a strong connection. And if you bond over, having a shared interest in type, that you will have other interests in common. Now, the other person might not have as much of an interest in type as you do, because, if you're here watching my video, you clearly have an interest in type. But if they're, for example, an NF type, that they're likely to have a lot of interest in common with you. Or if they are an NT type, or if they are an IN type, and so on and so forth, that there will be some interests in common. It'd be very unlikely for a person to identify as an INFJ, just like yourself, and to have no interest in common with you, or an ENFP or an ENTP, and so on and so forth. It's certainly less likely to be the case, this has to be said, that if a person tells you, like, say you're an INFJ, and the other person is like an ISFJ or an ISTJ, it's possible you have interests in common, of course. It's just a bit less likely. So these typings in the first instance, particularly MBTI typings, are very good preliminary indicators of whether you have interests in common, and if there is any reliable way to figure out in the first rough and ready fashion whether you're going to have a lot of interest in common, or potentially enough interest in common to overlap with yours, the N typing is going to be your best first reliable indicator. Is the other person an N type just like yourself? Again, the person could be an S type and still have overlap with you. Just just a little bit less likely is basically what I'm saying. So keep that in mind. Now, fourthly, I do want to talk about certain types that are, I think, particularly likely to be compatible with INFJ, and I will give you those types straight away. I don't have time to enter into more detail as to why, at least not in depth, as to why I think these are types that are likely to really click with INFJs. But first of all, I've made videos on these kind of pairings before. Second of all, there are two of them are known as golden pairs anyway, so you might already be aware of these being good type pairings, and this is my way of acknowledging that I agree with that kind of broadly general view. But of course, if you have an interest in me making specific, again, or more specific videos on those pairings, very happy to do that. Just let me know in the comments. Those four typings are ENFP, INTP, two golden pairs, INTJ, and this more so empirically than theoretically. Like, you could of course say, well, NI, of course there's going to be like a strong connection. That's the case, but I also just observed a lot of healthy and stable relationships between INFJs and INTJs, which tends to indicate that there is a strong potential for connection there. And finally, INFJ and INFJ. I could be biased because I am in an INFJ relationship myself, marriage myself, but obviously that has a lot of potential as well. So ENFP, INTP, INTJ, INFJ. That is also a way of capturing all the kind of shared interests that I was talking about before. Not necessarily to capture the same sort of way of getting each other in terms of your mental makeup, because as we know, like the MBTI tests often is a way of knowing about interests and where you lean in terms of how you think and what you think, but not always the best model to capture exactly kind of how a person is wired. Like, it can be reliable, but not always. We know that tests only are as accurate as what you're willing to say, and there's confirmation bias. There's many issues with tests, and a lot of people that you're going to meet are going to just know about the results in tests. But what I wanted to finish with is the fact that do give a chance to people who will tell you that they got S, who may nevertheless get an N typing in other systems, because these other systems might actually be closer to capturing the kind of framework of how they are internally wired, whereas the MBTI will talk more about capturing what interests they have. So they might be people who actually think quite similarly to you, who just happen to have different interests. But again, different interests is fine. It can actually bring excitement. It can introduce you to another world, as long as there is some overlap. So you just have to make sure there's some overlap. But also give a chance, make sure that you don't disregard people who get an ISFJ typing or an ESTJ or ESFJ typing, because these people, not only might they still have some interest in common with you, but according to other models, they might actually be N types, whereas the people who get the ENFP typings might be S types in these other models. So reality is always more complex than you think. Be as open as possible, but keep in mind health, attachment style, interests, maybe the four typings I've suggested, but also what the other typings are in these different models, which, as you know, are rich. Okay, so video's been going on forever. I'll leave you here. Happy New Year, guys. Have a wonderful end of the year celebration. And don't forget my Patreon page, and see you next year. Bye-bye.